Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're stepping into the dark, sleek halls of what we can think of as the Obsidian Archive. We're going to trace exactly how the invention of writing took these fluid, ever-changing oral myths and transformed them into the highly structured, foundational blueprints of human culture that, honestly, we still rely on today. So let's just dive right in and ask ourselves a pretty fundamental question. What actually built our cultural DNA? How are the epic stories, the complex religious beliefs, and those classic heroic tropes we consume today codified centuries ago on fragile clay tablets, carved stones, and vellum manuscripts? To answer that, we're going to open 5 vaults today. First, the dawn of epics. Second, shaping the classical world. Third, Eastern epics and beliefs. Fourth, forging European legends. And finally, archiving the global mythos. All right, let's crack open vault number 1, the dawn of epics, from the spoken word to stone and clay. Think about this. The birth of these cultural epics required a massive, actually, scratch that. It was an absolutely unprecedented technological leap. The invention of writing itself. Early Sumerian writing first popped up around 3400 BCE, followed pretty shortly by Egyptian hieroglyphics around 3100 BCE. And then, within a little over 1,000 years, humanity hit a huge milestone. Around 2100 BCE, the Sumerians recorded the earliest known version of the Epic of Gilgamesh. For the first time, a spoken myth was locked down into a physical medium. Right around this same ancient era, you start seeing flesh and blood leaders getting totally tangled up with myth. Take China, for example. Between 2852 and 2205 BCE, they were supposedly ruled by the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors. Now, these were mythical figures, sure, but they were very likely based on actual historical leaders. Meanwhile, over in Egypt, between 1553 and 1536 BCE, Pharaoh Akhenaten boldly rewrites his culture's spiritual blueprint. He establishes the official worship of Aten, a single supreme god, just totally overturning the traditional ancient Egyptian pantheon. These weren't just stories, these were the political and spiritual frameworks that governed ancient lives. And this right here is exactly why writing changed the game forever. Foundational beliefs were physically preserved so they could actually survive the collapse of their own empires. Look at the Enuma Elish. This Babylonian creation epic was documented around 1100 BCE on clay tablets and kept safe in the library of Ashurbanipal. Because it was physically written down, it outlasted the civilization that made it. Contrast that with other massive cultural touchstones from that era, like the Trojan War around 1250 BCE. We still blur the line between myth and historical fact with Troy, simply because we lack that definitive, contemporaneous written record. Moving right along to Vault 2, shaping the classical world, the Greek and Roman blueprint. So, around 800 BCE, the Greek alphabet drops, and boom, we get this massive flowering of literature that literally builds the classical world. By 750 BCE, Greek heavyweights like Homer and Hesiod are defining the gods and human tragedy through the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Theogony. Fast forward a couple of centuries, and dramatists like Aeschylus and Sophocles are bringing these mythical characters to life in tragic plays. Think Agamemnon, Antigone, and Oedipus the King. Eventually, Roman poets like Virgil and Ovid swoop in and utilize these exact same foundations to detail the mythical founding of Rome in the Aeneid and to catalog ancient tales in the Metamorphoses. But you've got to remember, these classical myths weren't just scratched onto parchment or papyrus. They were literally carved into stone. In 431 BCE, Greek builders completed work on the Parthenon. This massive temple dedicated to the goddess Athena is one of the very few ancient Greek monumental structures to survive into modern times, standing as a towering, physical manifestation of their mythic beliefs. Let's crack open our third vault, Eastern epics and beliefs, scaling up the divine. Over a sweeping historical period stretching from the 6th century BCE all the way to the 7th century CE, the foundational figures of massive global faiths walked the earth. According to tradition, Gautama Buddha, the founder of Buddhism, lived in ancient India and Nepal between 563 and 480 BCE. Centuries later, Jesus lived from approximately 4 BCE to 33 CE. And the Prophet Muhammad, the founder of Islam, supposedly lived from 570 to 632 CE. The written teachings, sparked by these individuals, would go on to fundamentally rewire the cultural DNA of billions of people today. Alongside the lives of these figures, we absolutely have to highlight this staggering milestone in recorded belief. Around 450 BCE, the Book of Genesis was collected and organized into its modern form. Just think about the cultural impact here for a second. This single collection contained the creation stories and ancestral narratives that became fundamental to early Christianity, Judaism, and Islam alike. It's a massive shared blueprint. Concurrently, over in the East, Hindu identity was being immortalized in these truly monumental texts. On one side, you have the oldest version of the Ramayana, written between 500 and 100 BCE, which tells the incredibly focused epic of the god Vishnu's incarnation, Rama. On the other side, you have the absolute behemoth that is the Mahabharata, organized into its modern form around 100 CE. It is mind-blowing to consider that the Mahabharata synthesized source material spanning centuries, dating as far back as the 9th century BCE, culminating in one of the most critical blueprints of Hinduism. And moving slightly forward to the 9th century, Near Eastern folklore is also getting carefully archived. Between 800 and 840 CE, the oldest surviving remnants of the Book of 1001 Nights were written down in Syrian. This effort secured an incredible collection of folktales and legends that established rich storytelling tropes that honestly still heavily dominate modern fantasy and literature right now. Vault 4, Forging European Legends, Gods, Monsters, and Kings. Before monks were churning out manuscripts to forge distinct European identities, myths were often preserved through intense physical craftsmanship. Like between 150 and 50 BCE, Celtic deities and rituals were hammered straight into the silver gun-to-struck cauldron, which, by the way, was miraculously recovered from a Danish peat bog centuries later. Much later on, around 1000 CE, the Ramsund carving in Sweden utilized a massive stone canvas to illustrate the Norse tale of Sigurd, a story deeply documented in the Volsunga saga. Then, bam, we get an absolute explosion of writing between the 11th and 14th centuries. Monks and scholars just start compiling the definitive epics of their lands. We see the oldest surviving manuscript of the Old English epic Beowulf drop in 1010. By 1100, monks in Ireland compile the Book of the Dun Cow. Then we get the German Nibelungenlied, Snorri Sturluson's hyper-comprehensive Norse prose Edda, and finally the Welsh White Book of Rithordic. Document by document, epic by epic, these texts permanently cemented the unique cultural DNA of these entire regions. Which brings us to arguably one of the most famous legends of all time. We often think of King Arthur as this ancient, timeless figure, but his legend actually took centuries of writing and rewriting across this very era to reach its definitive form. It started to gain huge traction in 1138 when Geoffrey of Monmouth published The History of the Kings of Britain. It finally reached its authoritative form in 1485 with Thomas Mallory's Le Morte d'Arthur. And fascinatingly, this was right around the exact same time, in 1489, that a comprehensive version of another legendary British character, Robin Hood, was also published. And that brings us to our final vault, archiving the global mythos, preservation, and discovery. As we move into the modern era, global oral traditions were meticulously documented, though, this archiving process was deeply complex and sometimes really controversial. Around 1550, Mayan creation myths were recorded in the Popol Vuh, using Latin characters, which likely saved those stories from an older lost hieroglyphic text. In 1835, Elias Lönnrot published the Kalevala, gathering Finnish oral myths through years of boots-on-the-ground field research. Later, in 1880, journalist Joel Chandler Harris published the Uncle Remus Tales, gathering folklore rooted in African myth from enslaved African Americans in the South. While highly successful, Harris faced serious accusations of taking these deep cultural myths and passing them off as his own works. But here's what's truly mind-blowing about this whole archival journey through human history. The library is still actively being unearthed today. In 1849, archaeologist Henry Layard made an incredible discovery in Iraq. He found the clay tablets containing the Babylonian creation epic Enuma Elish, the exact text we mentioned way back at the beginning of our journey. This foundational epic had been completely lost. It was unknown to modern scholars for centuries before this moment of literal unearthing. So, as we finally close the doors to the Obsidian Archive today, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on. If texts as massive as the Enuma Elish could be lost in the sands of time for millennia, what other foundational blueprints of human culture are still buried beneath our feet?